Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you being with us today. This is a webinar that we're doing, CBRS devices panel. Originally, we had planned to do this panel back as part of the members meeting, and we had some technical difficulties on the Monday of our members meeting that were reflected not just by us, but it's even been a more general issue with the internet. But in the spirit of trying to make sure we, have these conversations, we've been very fortunate to have our panelists agree to join us and continue the discussion a little bit later date than we wanted, but at the same time, we're recording this, and that'll be available for viewing shortly after the event as well. So any colleagues that you have that would be interested in this, we'll make sure to share a link in the coming days. So don't worry about that. We really don't have slides for these kinds of panel discussions. It's more conversational and a little bit more impromptu. So often I find them actually a little bit more interesting at the end of the day. With that, if we go to the next slide, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do as part of these events. So first of all, by joining the webinar, you agree to the terms of the OnGo Alliance privacy policy and webinar disclosure located in the event description. This session is being recorded, and the use and distribution is for the OnGo Alliance's use. Slides will be posted. There really aren't any slides for this one, but this deck would be available as part of the recording, as sparse as it is. And then, of course, we'll want to have an opportunity to address questions at the end of the webinar. And I think we're a little bit more relaxed on time here. We don't want to abuse the time of our panelists, but at the same time, we have a little bit of time that you can ask questions. There is a function in the GoToWebinar that you'll see over there, a questions panel. I will be able to see any questions that you bring in, and then I will be happy to submit those to the panelists as well as part of our discussion. If we don't get to some of the questions during the panel session, we do have a recording of those questions, and we'll try to make sure that we at least include some text answers as part of the material here. So with that, I would like to invite our panelists up on stage here, and I have a quick introduction for you. So first of all, Dan Quant. Dan is Vice President of Strategic Development and responsible for developing corporate strategies at our friends at MultiTech. So he's been representing MultiTech in various standardization group. I've had the good fortune of knowing Dan for, man, it's been 15 or maybe even 20 years, Dan, now that we've crossed paths at various orgs along the way. So his knowledge in wireless and telecom has really been something I've enjoyed having discussions with him. We also have Mike Rapp, Vice President of Product Management at Inseego. Mike joining us to discuss Inseego's point of view and some insights there. Jerry Gard. Jerry is the Director of Engineering and Product Management for Motorola Solutions Wireless Private Broadband Solutions. And with 30 years of experience in wireless communication systems, again, Jerry's got a lot of insight here that we can rely on him. Also glad to say Jerry is a member of our board of directors and our executive committee. So his leadership and influence has been very helpful to me and to the organization as a whole. And then finally, Guido Voltalina. Guido is commercial lead, CBRS SaaS solution, Nokia, and OnGo Alliance board member as well. So we've got a really good panel here. We're very fortunate to have this kind of quality of folks that we can discuss things with. So with that, we'll start some questions up, folks. So Mike, I'm going to start with you because you're first on my screen that I see, and work across the panel as it's presented on my screen here. So maybe Mike, give us some insight into some of the interesting developments that you're seeing or that Inseego is seeing in particular in the device ecosystem. What's going on right now with the device ecosystem from your guys' perspective?
Well, we've got a lot of really kind of interesting proof of concept and actual deployment activities that are happening right now. And just to give you a little bit of context on our portfolio, we basically got into the fixed wireless space several years ago when Inseego kind of changed its path from our MiFi Novatel days to actually kind of launch an FWA portfolio. And so it was 5G from the start. And so our product portfolio is sort of been geared mostly around 5G, although we certainly support the CBRS band 48 for private LTE as well. So given that, again, we're engaged with a number of proof of concept deployment activities. Some of the hot areas are with the Department of Defense. We've got some interesting things going on with them where we, are partnered with some of our infrastructure partners as well on some of those activities. Another hot area is in some engagements in factories and warehouses with use cases like video surveillance. And then another area that we've seen a lot of activity in is in the K-12 area for education, especially in some of the rural areas. In Utah in particular, we're engaged in a number of activities there related to K-12. So again, those are kind of some of the hot areas that we're seeing right now with private networks.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've heard that repeat of K-12 many times in my discussion with members. So no surprise there, and that has been a very important piece of the puzzle for us in these COVID times in particular. So Dan, on the MultiTech, how about you guys? What are you seeing from the perspective of the end user device space in particular?
Well, yeah, as Mike said, the government has certainly been pushing a lot of money and innovation into this 5G space, and so we've also been very much engaged in some of those similar projects like the warehousing and logistic project that Mike was referring to there. So that's definitely a bit of a game changer, I think. I don't think we really saw that with 4G and 3G, did we? The government plowing in billions of dollars into digitally transforming their processes. I mean, many of their processes, as you can imagine, are a little antiquated. You turn up on your first day and you literally walk around a warehouse picking out helmets, boots, and what have you. In an Amazon world, you would expect that all at the bottom of your bed or your bunk on your first day, wouldn't you, delivered to you? So I think what we're seeing in government really represents what we also see in that the pent-up demand from commercial and industrial enterprises, that ability of 5G to really digitally transform, automate, and create the efficiencies the industry is looking for. And so to that end, one of the more interesting developments that I see now is this closer integration with the cloud, the virtualization of services down to the edge, closer to where the data is being generated. And of course, 5G with broadband connectivity and low latency really removes that distance essentially down between a more centralized cloud deployment and where that data is being generated. So on a personal level, that's what I see as pretty exciting here with 5G.
Gotcha. Thanks, Dan. Guido, how about from your and Nokia's perspective?
Yeah, from our side, some of the verticals already mentioned, we definitely see a pickup in the automated vehicles with a private LTE deployment. Either those are in vertical like mines or even ports, the loading and unloading of vessels and so on. That is definitely a huge trend. And the good news is that from the early POC, we're transitioning now in full deployment. So from a device perspective, the reliability aspect, not just does it work or is connected, but under stress and heavy stress is definitely where we're looking at the reliability aspect because when you do a POC, you have a limited number of devices and you're kind of have a more control of the situation. When you scale into hundreds or thousands of devices and they're all contributing to the use case, then the reliability aspect is definitely emerging. One thing in the development that we're seeing getting more and more important is also the device management aspect. So not just the device itself, but the layers that enable not just the connectivity, but really the interaction of all the devices and how you manage them as they're scaling up in volume and functionality and priorities and all the aspect of the devices. Definitely is one more element of the ecosystem that contribute to the success of the use case and the full integration of the device itself.
Right, understood. Thanks, Guido. Jerry, how about on your guys' side?
Yeah, I think some of the really exciting things we're seeing is the integration of a lot of different technologies, even in the devices and into your network, whether that's Wi-Fi integrated with CBRS, or a device can do Wi-Fi, CBRS plus land mobile radio. We're obviously a leader in that and land mobile radio, so we're coming out with devices that do both. So you can have your one device that's your land mobile radio device, as well as your data device, working on CBRS or LT or Wi-Fi. So really you're turning the device into a kind of a jack of all trades. It doesn't matter what network is running on. You have a job to do. You just need to get your job done, whether it's a warehouse, you're in a smart city, that kind of thing. So you look at a smart city installation, you have a lot of data devices out there, you have voice devices, you have devices that are doing both, right? So that's really what we see as this whole integration of different devices, different networks, all coming together. As Guido mentioned, this managing the devices, yeah, that's a huge issue. You talk about a customer that has thousands of devices. You can't manage those individually, right? So this pulls cloud into the whole game. You need to manage all those devices, probably a cloud solution. Customers want to see where are my devices? Are they working? Do they have connectivity? What kind of data are they using? What websites are they going to or whatnot? And really get strict management on that. And as and the first time you mentioned cloud, then you talk about cybersecurity, right? So these very secure cloud solutions, really, you're going to see this more and more in the industry. And some people will talk about, well, is cloud secure or is on-prem secure? And really, they both can be very, very secure. So.
That's an interesting, aspect of this as well. I've been kind of making a few notes as we've been talking. And, one of the things that occurs to me, and Dan, I'll ask you to start this one off, is that when CBRS hit the road and got on its way, this was really focused in the LTE world and 4G. And as we've now moved into the 5G world, the kinds of use cases that we can explore and perhaps take advantage of, I think that's something that is still being understood. What's your guys' perspective in the advantages in the 5G device spaces? What does this do for us that we could not do before?
Yeah, so good question, right? We work in a industry that is really running at breakneck speeds, right? So the FCC authorized the CBRS spectrum for fully commercial deployments not even 2 years ago, and in that period of time, we're now straight into 5G, and so clearly that spectrum can support 4G, it can support 5G, it can support 4G and 5G simultaneously. So there's a lot of permutations there, and clearly the enterprises are looking to 5G, right? They want to buy into the new technology. They're not like operators. They're not holding the legacy technology of 4G. So in an ideal world, they want to move directly into 5G, have a long lifetime of spending and getting their return on investment, and at the same time picking up on some of the new features of 5G, which are not just low latency and broadband broadband connectivity and mission critical connectivity. This is also about access to spectrum, like shared bands, even like unlicensed bands as well, up at 5 and 6 gig, which I guess is part of the release 16 stuff coming through. So that demand is there, but of course, you know, new stuff is shiny, it's expensive, and it perhaps doesn't do every use case. You know, we're leaders in scaling out LoRaWAN networks. You don't need to backhaul a LoRaWAN network with a 5G connection. You could easily do that on 4G. You're talking to sensors that have 12 bytes that are infrequently updating. Right. And I think the enterprises are only really now starting to absorb the hype. And as I said to one of our customers yesterday, you're 6 months behind the hype and you're 6 months ahead of reality, right? Because that hype is quite a ways out there. And I think really what you're going to see is a fabric that contains 5G. Over time, more of it will become new radio. But LTE is still the workhorse of IoT today, and it needs to remain that way for the time being. I mean, LTE does stand for long-term evolution, right?
So I agree with Dan, and I just to add to it, there's the hype, and of course the customer want to be future-proof, and so he's asking 5G by definition, right? That's the argument. And then there's the reality where if you really have to, you know, performing 4G or LTE versus which one is the use case that really need the 5G, you can see that you know there's a huge difference in how many use cases are really needed in 5G. Saying that, I'm not saying you know I'm pro 5G, of course, and I want to promote those use cases. They are extreme and solve problems that could not be solved before. But if you look at the deployment of private LTE in CBRS in other bands as well, as Dan mentioned, the majority are, you know, really let's call it more 4G performances within 5G. That is totally fine, and you want to secure the path to a full 5G, of course.
Yeah, I think we do have this notion of you know, especially from a customer base that may not be as educated on what they're trying to achieve, is that when you ask them what the difference between 4G and 5G is, they say it's 1G better. And what does that mean? You know, and is it a right size solution for their particular use case? I know, Mike, you guys are really focusing on the 5G space. You know, what is your experience there with communicating that aspect of it? Is right sizing your approach?
I have gone through all manner of conversations like this. I had one conversation with a company a few years ago who needed 5G, had to have 5G. This was the only solution for them. 10 minutes later, I realized they're talking about Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz, right? So I've had that end of the spectrum all the way up to, you know, very high-end applications that are really taking the use out of 5G. I think it's about us really now educating our customers that the hype on 5G, it's there, it's coming, but this is a journey that takes some time to play out. And that really there's a mixture here, and that mixture will enable you to be able to connect low power wireless access devices, CAD-M, narrowband, LoRa, things like that, all the way through the sweet spot of Cat4, Cat6 as we see it today, that 1 to 100 meg communication, and then 5G today is the higher end of the portfolio, but over time that new radio will filter down into that sweet spot.
So Mike,
Alan, like Daniel said, 4G is certainly the workhorse for CBRS and private networks today, and you know, I think that what 5G, and again, it is going to take you know, time for the new technology to really gain a foothold, especially I think in the CBRS and private network area. And you know, it's sort of like bringing this interesting toolbox of new capabilities into the picture. And there's certainly lots of use cases out there that we all hear about, but when you start considering things like network slicing coming into the picture, and mobile edge computing, and you can really start envisioning some of the really cool kinds of use cases of all kinds of sectors, and both in the consumer world as well as in the enterprise world, that all of that brings into the picture. So it's an exciting time, and we're still in early days naturally from a 5G perspective.
So Mike, and then I'm going to go to Jerry, is what in a greenfield kind of approach, if you have a customer that comes in and says, I have nothing, I want to do something, and understanding, of course, what they need. Do you have? Is it a tougher discussion with them with the limited knowledge they may have of what they really need to do?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead. Yep.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that being on kind of at the very end of the edge on the device side, we rely a lot on partnering with our infrastructure partners, as well as just those that are rolling out the networks themselves. So I think they're the ones doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of educating their customers, in terms of the benefits of deploying 5G in a greenfield type of arrangement. And we're still not really to the stage yet where the certifications are all there, regulatory wise for 5G and CBRS. So it's still kind of early days, and so a lot of our engagements, where the commercial engagements, are still really around 4G.
Got it. Jerry.
Oh yes, yeah. So I was just going to jump in. It really does require some educating of the customer, right? What are your use cases? And oh, by the way, what technology do you need to support that use case? And there are certainly some use cases you need 5G. And what you end up finding is a lot of use cases, obviously, can stand alone without 5G. As I said, 4G is a workhorse. You look at the IoT world, without a doubt. Right. So it's a matter of driving a little deeper than maybe the customer would be used to doing, right? To really understand a little bit more about the lower underlying technology.
And it really depends on the knowledge of the customer. I mean, there's one step where if the customer is deploying as first a private LTE network, right? Then you have a level of performances that are achieved because it's a private LTE. It's not really about the 4G of the 5G part.
Right.
And so they're going from nothing to I need private 5G. And for them, it's a little bit more difficult to understand which part belongs to the private LTE versus the 5G part of the story. Of course, they're asking everything because they don't want to make any mistake and want to be future-proof. Right. But on the other hand, you need to explain sometimes, what are the benefits brought by the private LTE and the fact that you have access to spectrum through CBRS directly, and what are instead the specific technology related to the 5G, characteristic that solve those specific use cases.
Yeah, and then really part of it is defining what is 5G. It's not just the over-the-air protocol, right? You have the network slice and you have mobile edge computing. There's a lot of different pieces of 5G. Maybe some of those make sense, some of those maybe they don't make sense for that use case, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I'd also like to bring up spectrum as well. We're fortunate here in the United States that CBRS was defined by the FCC to be agnostic of technology. So you can put 4G, you can put 5G, you can put other technologies that can conform to Part 96 into that spectrum. Other countries maybe don't work like that. Other countries are more focused around the technology for a spectrum. Germany with the Bundesnetzagentur and the UK with Ofcom, they've allocated similar frequencies, not so different from CBRS, but those frequencies are really designed for 5G. So if you want to get a head start in a private or dedicated enterprise network in those countries, then you're already your arms being twisted really into starting with a 5G network, which, as I think some of the other guys here said, Guido and others were saying, that could be a steep, learning curve. Whereas starting with 4G LTE or blending 4G and 5G, that's not such a steep curve for the enterprise.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, Daniel. It leveraged kind of kicked off a question in my mind. Mike, are you guys seeing any gaps in the kind of end user device offerings out there that need to be addressed, or is there, are we sufficient for the moment? What's your take on that?
I think from our perspective, we don't really see any gaps from the end device perspective. Yeah, I don't think that we're on the path of supporting things like SA in our devices, which will definitely fuel 5G private networks, and we'll have support at the right time when customers demand it, and the networks are there from a private network perspective. And but other than that, yeah, I don't really see any gaps from the CPE perspective.
So Jerry, building on that, are there any roadblocks to the adoption in the 5G space from your guys' point of view?
I think Daniel pointed out and Guido pointed out, it's new technologies. It's the shiny new thing, right? So you always pay a little bit of a premium for that. You look at what's going on in the chip vendor world these days. The 5G chips are really kind of focused more on the higher end chips versus the lower end chips. So there is definitely a price gap here right now, right, between 4G and 5G. Maybe start looking at the low end kind of sensor world. I think that's going to be a while before we can get 5G chipset that's native to that kind of thing. So that's probably the biggest thing right now, I would say.
Gotcha. Guido, any insights there?
Yeah, I would say I echoed Jerry's comment and Mike as well. They're starting now some very specific verticals where they like less, I don't know, the router attached to another device that is attached and connected. So they want a little bit more integrated solution in some cases. And I'm sure that as we approach more and more verticals, there will be always a specific, form factor or device or functionality that is needed. I think that right now, all the elements are in place to create an integration that works and works fine for pretty much any use case.
Gotcha.
So as Jerry referred to, the vendor chain can be quite long, particularly in IoT devices. That's often almost like a baton race. A chipset vendor develops a chipset, a module vendor then creates a reference design out of that, and then a company like MultiTech would build IoT solutions with a module, and then that solution would be sold to a utility or a oil and gas company or whomever. And so quite a baton race there. And when I look at the vendor chain at the moment, as Jerry said, those chipsets are high-end chipsets, right? And so high-end chipsets make high-end modules, and those modules are about literally 10 times the cost of 4G right now. And it's a bit of a chicken and an egg game, right? If you look at the smartphone business, it's a little bit of a shorter baton race. It's chipset, handset vendor, consumer. But if you look at that market, the price point is now down to about $300 in some of these budget 5G smartphones. And that happened because that volume is now up into hundreds of millions of units, right? Sure. In the IoT space, we're not into the hundreds of millions of 5G devices yet. So that price point remains high. Clearly, it's going to go down. We can all speculate, what percentage, how many years it's going to take, but that 10 times the price gap is going to come down, and that's why we need to really focus on applications that are game changers at the moment for 5G to start spurning that demand and get things moving. I alluded to that 1 to 100 meg sweet spot for IoT. So there's a work item at 3GPP called Red Cap Reduced Capabilities. And I think as we go into 2023, 2024, that kind of technology is going to start getting out there. And so again, you'll see that new radio cost and complexity come down into that price point. So it takes a little bit of time. But you asked the question, what are we missing in the product portfolio? Well, you know, if we could get those prices down much lower, then we could start to do very low cost bridging and USB dongle type products, which at the moment with the price point of those modules and chipsets, it's, you know, people don't want to spend $500 for a dongle they plug into a computer. So, you know, it takes a bit of time.
Yeah, there's always that magic spot, isn't there? Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
One of the things that we've been wrestling with quite a bit and having a lot of internal discussions about with respect to 5G and CBRS with our products is that we all have come from the world with kind of a limited number of infrastructure players in the wireless domain, and we've gone through the process of regulatory certifications and then forum level certifications, and then finally, carrier certifications for either stock products or open device type non-stocked products. And now with, it's sort of in parallel with the emergence of CBRS and private networks, is we have the Open RAN ecosystem. And of course, we love the work that the OnGo Alliance is doing in terms of certification and promoting interoperability and everything. But it's kind of like a whole new world for us to think about. We're already, executing our products against tens of thousands of test cases with all of the various certs that we're already used to doing. And, we're working hard to partner with, a good number of Open RAN players. But it's kind of like, now, how do we take our CPE products to a whole new level of interop compliance with all of the new players and the new entrants in the market. So anyway, it's not really a roadblock, but it's certainly kind of growing pains that we're going through.
Right. Yeah, it's a speed bump, not a roadblock, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Just to remind our listeners, the people that are participating, if you do have questions, use that question panel. I'll try to feed those in, but while I'm waiting for any questions, maybe sort of the last question on my mind before we see if the audience has any is, Guido, get out your crystal ball. We've looked at, I think when 2020 rolled around, we said 2021, everything will be back to normal and life will be good. And we realized 2021 was not back to normal, and we powered through. We're all hopeful for 2022, but look at your crystal ball for me and tell me what you see in this space. 2022, 2023. What's the world look like from 5G, CBRS?
Yeah, definitely. We went from proof of concept and validating that the CBRS is a reliable and good approach for building solution and scaling it. We're at the verge now of scaling it. So we're seeing now that the POCs are becoming multiple deployments. As mentioned earlier, those multiple are mainly 4G use cases and technology, but with the caveat that the migration to 5G, the path to 5G has to be in place. So we always approach the 4G, 5G debate not as one or the other, but is from one to the other, and we're just riding that, from one to another, so that path is open. And if we look at 2022, 2023, I really believe that those are the years where we will see not only multiple of the proof of concept, but also from a device perspective, layers of different devices, different applications within the same network. Of course, at the beginning, the the customer want to solve one problem, one very specific problem and application. But once the infrastructure is in place, we can see that the adding of devices become a multiplier that is definitely a 2022. Education is huge. I mean, it's like a untapped one for private deployments, and enterprises are all additional markets. As Mike mentioned earlier, before, you were really dealing with only a few operators, and now we're just scaling so broadly on so many enterprises and different. So definitely, I see in the crystal ball a lot of green and positive growth.
Gotcha. Jerry, how about your crystal ball? What's it show you?
Yeah, I think 2022 really is the big inflection point. As Guido said, there's been a lot of POCs out there, a lot of customers, a lot of interest. I think the POCs are in general, a lot of positive feedback. So it's going to build upon itself. I think 2022 is a big inflection point. POCs turn into big system deployments, and that alone then is going to drive momentum as other people see this. This is a really very successful space, very successful technology. Probably the one thing, the one big headwind is just the supply chain, right? And the worldwide supply chain problems, you're probably still going to see that a little bit in 2022. And so coming out of 2022, I think you're going to be poised really for good business hitting 2023.
Dan, how about yours?
Yeah, so look, I don't think that pandemic has done us any favors, right? I mean, many of us were locked out of our buildings, our place of work. So I think that's part of the reason for what was perhaps a longer period of trials and proof of concepts around CBRS. As Guido said, a ton of those now in 4G. So I think in 2022, we'll see a lot of those taking off the runway. For me, though, the elephant in the room with 5G is really the SA mode. We've been shipping a number of 5G units this year, and almost every customer has been asking for SA mode. And some bands that's been possible in N78 over in Europe, and more recently N77 in the UK, for example, in that 3.8 to 4.2 gig range. But it's only really now that we start to see SA mode in CBRS. And if you're an enterprise and you want to use the CBRS band, NSA isn't particularly helpful. You don't want an anchor in LTE that's in a licensed band that's owned by a carrier or a spectrum holding company. You want to be able to just contain that within the CBRS band. So, many sleepless nights and many phone calls and meetings with customers wanting to be able to have a standalone deployment in 5G in that SA band. And so I now see the light coming. I see it moving through the vendor chain that I described earlier on. And I think 2022, it's just going to be all about SA mode. And that really speaks to what the enterprise is looking for. And I also think that 5G in 2022, you'll start to see more of this convergence, as Jerry referred to, Wi-Fi, LoRa, having 4G and 5G, perhaps Bluetooth, really converging all of these different wireless technologies, many of them very proprietary, and really converging that down to really just perhaps even no more than a handful of wireless technologies that address worker productivity, wearables, sensors, voice communication, data, all of that converging inside the enterprise.
Got it. So Mike, your prognostications, what do you see?
Well, I think that it's going to be, tied in with what I think Jerry and Daniel already touched on. One of the things that we've already seen and we're going to see more and more of is the strong demand for the lower cost CPEs, especially in these use cases like the K-12. Also kind of require that low cost CPE for students in their dorm rooms or or use, in campus offices and things like that. But like was already mentioned, the 5G chipset costs right now are a little bit prohibitive to, what's probably really needed in the marketplace. So driving down those chipset costs to make the devices for these kinds of low-cost CPE use cases more, attractive, I think, is a trend that hopefully will happen. The other thing that was mentioned already was managing these devices. That's something at Inseego that we believe in strongly. We think that what we're getting a lot of demand already for TRO69 type capabilities. So device management, and we have our own cloud solution called Inseego Connect, which is intended for that use as well. So that trend we think is going to persist and even grow bigger in 2022. And then I totally agree with Daniel's essay comment that the beauty of a private network is being able to leverage spectrum that you don't have to purchase licenses for, unless of course you're a PAL license holder. But if you need an LTE anchor band for it, it sort of defeats the purpose. So coming with SA support in the 5G network is going to be crucial for the real, I think, uptick in the takeoff for 5G CBRS.
Great. Well, gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun for me. A really good discussion, and it's always one of these days we can have these discussions in person, hopefully in New Orleans coming up in January. But I want to thank you all for your time, for your participation here. Like I said, this for our audience, this has been recorded. We will make it available to the members to look at later. If you do have questions later on, please drop them to me, and I'll be happy to share them with our panelists. But thank you all. It's greatly appreciated for your time, your continued support of OnGo Alliance, CBRS, etc. And the world of 5G awaits us, hopefully, with a lot of excitement, a lot of neat things that we'll get to talk about in upcoming meetings as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today, and wish you all enjoyable rest of your Thursday. Everybody stay safe, stay well, and we'll go ahead and close it down. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.